Good afternoon, everyone. Can I please just get someone to tell me whether or not they can hear me, all good, or and that you can see the screen, or feel free to use the chat box as well.
I can hear you, Jess, and I can see everything.
Awesome. Great to hear. That's very reassuring. Okay. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to our Farm Water Audit Lunch series. My name is Jess Armstrong. I am the Community Engagement Officer and Project Officer for the On-Farm Water Management Project. Today we're looking at part two of our Farm Water Audit series. A fortnight ago, some of you would have sat in on our first one, which was calculating our on-farm water requirements. Today, we're looking at estimating tank and dam storage capacity, and our third webinar, which is on the 26th of November, is looking at calculating losses and determining how long water will last on our properties in our audits. So, without too much of a further ado, I'll just go through the general housekeeping, of course, as we always do. Pop your cameras on if you can and your internet allows it. It's lovely to speak to faces rather than just initials on a screen, but whatever you're most comfortable with. Ask questions using your microphone. Please feel free to unmute or use the chat function as well. I see some of you guys have got it all down pat. But also, if you're not asking me a question, please pop yourself on mute if you know there's going to be some background sound. Hopefully, all of you would have printed off your work booklet, or I'm hoping some of you may have received your farm water audit kit in the post. If you haven't, they were sent off on Thursday last week, so you should be expecting them shortly. And of course, this session will be recorded for training and distribution back to registered attendees as well. So hopefully we don't have any issues with any of that. So as I just mentioned, we're up to part two of our farm water audit series, and our third and final part at this stage. I'm still thinking about throwing in a fourth one. But the final one at this stage will be on the 26th of November at the same time. So here's your reminder. If you haven't already, please register for that one and come along if you can. A quick recap of the resources that we've got alongside this webinar series, and if you also attend one of our face-to-face workshops, you will have the Farm Water Audit Workbook, which is obviously the book that contains two sections, a worked example and a space for you to have a go at conducting your own farm water audit as well. You would have also received a copy of the Local Land Services Drought Plan template, which is a really important resource for you having a bit of a reflection of what your dry time or drought strategy might potentially be. It's a really useful document, which is designed to be a simple back of the envelope. You run a couple numbers on what your decisions around what livestock you retain and keep during this period, where it might be a bit drier or you have some challenging circumstances. It also helps you figure out what feed you've got on hand. There is a section for you to include some of your water numbers. And it's just overall a really useful resource to print off and write down on. And of course, thirdly, you have the New South Wales DPI Tocal College Ag Guide for farm water, which would have been sent out in your farm water audit kit. But any tables that you will require going through the work booklet throughout the series and the full day workshops are included in your workbook. So don't stress if you see any references to anything, any tables that you don't have that you think might just be in the Tocal Ag Guide. I promise I've included them in the workbook. So I've already spoken a little bit around obviously utilising something like the drought plan template from local land services, but something that I apologise, I've left the slide out of it this week, but just to touch on what the on-farm water management planning project is for anyone who didn't get to our first webinar or might be re-watching these recordings and hasn't seen the first one. The On-Farm Water Management Project, it is funded by the Australian Government's Future Drought Fund. It is supported by the Southern New South Wales Drought Resilience Adoption and Innovation Hub and is led by Murray Local Land Services. So Holbrook Landcare Network is one of several delivery partners across Southern New South Wales who are responsible for running events like this to help our landholders and land managers get a grasp on what their on-farm water requirements are, to conduct these audits, and to also help you start developing a farm water management plan, which will encompass everything, including your farm water audit process, but also includes the opportunity for you to explore the limitations, strengths and weaknesses, and opportunities in your current farm water system to help you ensure that you have increased water security during drought. And you also have opportunities to explore other things that you might want to do in your business, such as increasing carrying capacity, increasing access to water across different points of your property, increasing suitable water quality. It might also mean that you get to put yourself in a position where you have suitable water to be able to, say, take on adjustment livestock to increase cash flow at certain times. There's lots of different opportunities that you as a business owner might have, but ensuring that your infrastructure and ensuring that your systems are built up in a way that's going to benefit you to take on those opportunities is something really valuable about your farm water management plan. So I won't go too much more into the background of the project outside of that. And we'll just go straight into what our worked example is for today. And we will, so we'll just get straight into it, I guess. So if we remember from our first one, where we were calculating our farm water requirements, we were looking at things like how many livestock we're going to retain during this challenging time or dry time. We're also looking at what our general household requirements are. We're looking at what our general farm needs are, such as spraying or I've had a mental blank and I shouldn't. Sorry, I've had a mental blank. But anyway, general farm requirements, of course, and our firefighting as well, if you're in a location where you know that you are at a high fire risk and would like to obviously have that added security. Sorry, there's just a couple people that I have not muted. Sorry. So, according to this example, we are based on a cattle property located here at Holbrook. We know that we are about 209 hectares in size. The household has 4 adult residents. Our garden/lawn area is 0.2 hectares. On our property during a dry time, so I've gone through and I've identified that I have 3 dams that are most reliable during a stressful period. And that's Dam 1, Dam 2, Dam 3. I got very creative with the names. We have one house tank, which obviously has a diameter of 3 meters and a height of 3.2. We know that we've got 31 hectares sown to oats and we've got 100 head of dry cattle. So to recap on what we did last session, what we did was we obviously calculated the water requirements for all of those sections. So we know that for our livestock, over a summertime period, which we're going to assume for the purpose of this audit that the summertime period is from October to March. So it's about 181 days that we're assuming that we're going to have no rain, and that is our summer period. So for this summer period, we've calculated out how much water we think that our property, our farm, is going to use. So I won't go through each of these, but you can see that we've calculated all of these into either litres or megalitres for convenience. What we had by the end of last session was table number 9 completed, which is in your farm water audit booklet. Sorry. It is on page 13 if you would like to refer back. And so what we've done is we've written down, obviously, how many days in our summer period. We have added all of our usages, so our requirement, and we've come up with our total summer usage requirement. And we've divided that by the number of days during the summer period. So we know on a daily basis, our farm is going to be using 14,180.17 litres of water on a daily basis throughout summertime. So what we're going to calculate today is obviously the capacity of our tanks and dams on our farm and in our system. So we're going to be looking at these 3 dams and our house tank. Just like knowing how much feed we've got on hand, either in the paddock, in the shed, or in the silo, knowing how much water we have the capacity to store, so our maximum water capacity, and of course what our current volume is really crucial for us making on-farm decisions about where we put stock, whether or not we destock, when we can go back up to regular numbers, how we manage our paddocks, how we manage our feed, how we utilize stock containment. So when we're looking at storage capacity, we're identifying the existing storage capacity. So our dams, our tanks, and you might also include water entitlements. I've highlighted in that red because I'm just going to get to that in a minute. The other thing is you're also going to identify your limitations. So usable or reliable water versus your total water. So what we're talking about there is obviously identifying your dams or your water storages that you know are secure through a dry period. And also taking out any things like, for example, if you've got creeks fenced off and you know that you won't water or graze on them. So just knowing the areas of your farm, which of course you would because you're there on it every day, but identifying where the limitations are and potentially which ones you shouldn't be including in your audit, and of course which ones you should. Just to touch, of course, on the entitlements part, and this is just my sort of throw in. So why bores aren't included in particular in this farm water audit series is because it's challenging to quantify what bores contribute to your to the farm water audit process. Regardless, the storage component that we're looking at is a non-negotiable. It's essential, regardless of if you have bores or not. It's how we ensure that we've got enough water on hand. So the important things to consider is that when you're doing your farm water audit, we kind of want to assume that anything that will go wrong or anything that can go wrong might go wrong. So you need to have that storage component, ensuring that you can keep up with your requirements so that if your pump blows up or down a bore, or say, for example, your solar is not functioning, or say, for example, you've had some cattle knock a float off a trough, you want to make sure that you know your numbers based on what your storage is. Having a bore is great, and we will probably go through it in potentially that 4th session that I'm thinking about adding. But in the meantime, if you do have bores, it's important to consider things such as your flow rate, your peak supply demands, and your head and your pressure, and of course where you're getting that water to go from that bore and the type of reticulation you have in to support that infrastructure. So tanks, poly, etc. So for the purpose of this though, we won't be including bores in the audit. We are focusing on water requirements on our farm and water storage, and of course some losses that are associated with the environment and like evaporation, seepage, and residual water, which will be covered in part 3, and of course how long all of that will last for the summertime period. We're talking about estimating, so capacity and estimating current volume. Estimating capacity means that we are measuring from the full depth of water, from where the silt level is up to obviously the highest watermark, as if it's completely full. and we measure the width and length at full water level. When we're estimating current water volume, and we're looking at the depth of the actual water, so from the silt level to where the water currently is. So again, measuring width and length at the actual water level. And I hope you can appreciate my little diagrams. I tried really hard to draw. So what I will mention as well, when it comes to your depth and having a perception about how much water you have on hand, when you're looking at a tank like this and you think it's a meter down from its maximum or its high water line, we need to remember that dams aren't perfect squares. They're not perfect rectangles. They have a battering or a slope. And often when we are going down, say, a meter lower than what that high water line is, you've actually got considerably less water than you probably think you do. So that is why estimating your current volume is really important, and having an accurate depth of your dam so that you can account for that slope and that difference of percentage of water that you have available. So the first one that we're going to do, we're going to look at our tank in our example scenario, and we're going to write in our results into table number 6, which is on page 8. So when we're estimating the obviously capacity of tanks, they're really easy. They're cylinders, and to be honest, hopefully when you've bought it, you know what its maximum capacity is. So in this circumstance, we know from our example scenario that our house tank has a diameter of 3 meters. Its height is 3.2 meters. We are going to use the surface area calculation of pi times r squared to determine our surface area. And then we're going to times our surface area by the height of the tank to determine its maximum capacity. So in this circumstance, we need to remember that to determine radius, we need to actually divide diameter by 2, because radius is half of a diameter. So what we're looking at then, as we look at the right-hand side of this slide, is that pi times 1.5 squared equals 7. We'll round up and say 7.07 meters squared. We're then going to times our surface area by 3.2, and that is going to give us our cubic meters of capacity. Sorry, so it'll be 22.62 cubic meters. To convert cubic meters to litres, we're going to times that by 1,000. So therefore, we know our house tank in our example scenario is going to have a capacity of 22,619.47 litres. So what we can do is in table 6, we can include what our surface area was, what our approximate volume in cubic meters is, and if you'd really like to, you can include the water storage capacity in megalitres, which I believe off the top of my head, without flicking forward in slides, is 0.022. Could be wrong, but we'll double check that. So enter this into table number 6. So that's pretty easy. We found out our tank capacity. Now we're going to be looking at estimating our dam capacity, which has a couple different calculations based on the shape of your dam. First thing that you need to do is determine the width, length, and depth of the dams that you have in meters. You need to calculate the surface area in square meters, and then you need to calculate the volume in cubic meters. So we know that the surface area volume is going to equal surface area times depth, and we're going to use 0.4 as our factor for batter, and we're going to times it by 1,000 to convert to litres. Now, the batter factor refers to the slope of the dam. In most dams, 0.4 refers to a 1 meter drop in depth for every 3 meters of distance down the dam bank. Shallower dams, the batter factor may be less than that. It might be 0.3, and in very shallow dams, it might be 0.2 or 0.1. Now, if anyone has any questions about that, we can answer them. I do have David Thompson online who can have a bit of a chat about that. But for now, if everyone's okay with us just working off 0.4 as the batter factor for this equation, we're going to do that. And I'm just going to move on forward. So obviously, we're estimating our current volume differs from estimating capacity is that we're using the exact same calculations, except instead of the maximum depth, we're using the actual depth of our dams. So we're getting out and we're having a crack at determining what the depth is. And we can do that. I think my next slide's this. We can do that by using something as simple as a dam deep tool. So a dam deep tool is, and I won't play the video because I'm just not having enough time as I had hoped, but the dam deep tool is a really simple tool. It's a hand reel that you use 10 to 20 pound fishing line on. You use a sinker, 3 Lumo beads, and a float. And essentially what you do is you thread, you put your fishing line through 2 Lumo beads, then you thread on your float, and then you thread on a 3rd Lumo bead, and then you attach a sinker with a swivel on it. And you'll have something that looks roughly like this. So the sinker's in Greg's hand, and the float's there. There's another Lumo bead there. And essentially, what you do to the very top bead is you thread a small piece of fishing line through it. And what that does is create some resistance so that when you cast it out into the dam, the float goes up and the resistance of the top Lumo bead actually keeps that bead at the surface because the float's pushed it up. And what you can do then is gently reel it in, like wrapping it around the hand reel again. And of course, when you get to the point where your Lumo bead is, you just measure that with a measuring tape, or if you're really confident in how long your steps are. And so by measuring where the Lumo bead is at the top to where the sinker is will give you the actual depth of your dam from the silt layer, obviously, to the top of where the water currently is. So that is an easy tool that you can use, very easy to make, very cheap. And rather than having to get the kayak out whenever you want to go test your dams and carrying around a big pole, it's a really easy tool to use. So you actually have a QR code and link to that video, which is thankfully from Agriculture Victoria, that you can use to actually see how Greg makes these tools and how you can use it at the dam. So that's a useful tool. So in your book as well, on the pages of 6 and 7, you've got all the equations that you'll need to determine your dam capacity. So the ones that we will be using today will be a rectangular dam because completely coincidentally, I mustn't like calculating triangles or circles because all the dams in our worked scenario are either square or rectangle. But what you'll notice, obviously, is that the biggest change to the calculations is based on what the shape of the dam is. In a circle dam, you will be using 0.8 times the width times the length as your calculation. And in a triangular, you'll be using width by length divided by 2. So we have already done our house tank, so that's brilliant. What we're going to go on to now is obviously working out dam 1, 2, and 3. So for dam 1, we know that our length and our width is 30 meters. 30 meters times 30 is 900 square meters. Now that we're going to determine our volume, we know that our batter factor is going to be 0.4 times our 900 square meters times our depth, which is going to give us 1,440 cubic meters. So when we times that by 1,000 to get our meters, we know that we're going to have 1,440,000 litres of water, or 1.44 megalitres of water available in that dam at its maximum capacity. So if it was full, this is how much water we know that it's going to have in it. We'd follow the same working out for dam 2. We know that it's a rectangular dam. It is 25 metres by 20. It brings us to 500 square metres. Our batter again is 0.4 times 500 square metres times 2. And that brings us to 400 cubic metres. We know then by timesing by 1,000, our volume for that particular dam is going to be 400,000 litres, 0.4 megalitres. And dam 3, 35 metres times 35 gives us 1,225 metres squared. Our volume equals, of course, the batter factor, 0.4 times 1,225 metres squared times our 4 metre depth, brings us to 1,960 cubic metres, which, of course, timesing by 1,000 brings us to 1,960,000 litres, I think. I think I said that wrong. Anyway, we've got 1.96 megalitres of water available in our dams. So the capacity, the maximum capacity of all 3 dams available on our property in our example scenario, based on the fact that we're assuming that they are completely full, this is what we're looking at. So what we can do is we can plug all of these figures into table number 6. So as you can see, I've gone ahead and I've included the width, length, and depth, surface area, the approximate cubic meters, and I've included the megaliter storage capacity as well. So from the time period that we're looking at, from evaluating and identifying our water sources that we know are going to be reliable during summertime, or we know are the most reliable on our property, we know that we've got a total capacity of 3,822,619.47 litres, approximately. So that's great to know. There we go. Okay. So what we can now do is we can pop this into table number 10, which is located on, it's located on table number on page number 13. So as you can see though, we haven't completely finished this process. We've now covered through part 1 of the webinar series, how much water is required for livestock, household, general farm needs, and firefighting. Now we've just calculated our storage capacity of all available water storages that we consider reliable throughout this drought period or dry time period that we're looking at. The challenge to you, if you would like to, and to compare, is to actually go back and compare some of your current volumes. Hopefully you either already have a dam deep measuring tool, or you've already measured your dams out of curiosity using another method, or if you would just like to have a go and just use a random depth, you can compare obviously what a maximum capacity versus your current volume is. And for the next webinar, I will actually throw in an example so you can have a side-by-side comparison. So what these sections of the farm water audit process haven't considered is, of course, the losses. So it looks great that we've got 3 million litres of water available if they are full before we go into the summertime period. But what we haven't accounted for, obviously, is evaporation, seepage, and the water that we often have at the bottom of our dams when things get quite dry, which is our residual water, which residual water often has poor water quality, and it often doesn't have a lot of features that our livestock like to drink. And if you need any reminders of that, jump back to our session 1, our part 1, where our lovely LLS vet talks about water quality. So we haven't accounted for those losses yet. And that's what's going to be covered in part 3, where we're going to go through calculating losses for our dams, and of course our residual water. And then we'll be also figuring out essentially how many days that water would last during that summertime period. So that sort of brings this small section of running those numbers for estimating your tank and dam storage capacity. And I would encourage everyone to have a crack using section 2 of the workbook to explore some of your own calculations and to compare some of your current volumes. So taking the time to estimate what your maximum capacity is, and then go out and do a measurement of your dam depth as it currently is and compare where you're currently sitting. Because as I said, knowing those numbers are really powerful for your decision making and how you continue to manage your system in the next few months. So that brings me to the second part of today's webinar that I really wanted to provide people with the opportunity to see some cool tools about how you can use satellite imagery to actually estimate, to potentially help identify some of your dams that may be more reliable during dry times. And also, of course, to help you estimate your maximum capacity of the dams across your property or in your system, and how to utilise Water New South Wales maximum harvestable rights calculator. So what I'm just going to do, bear with me, is I'm going to stop sharing my slides and then I'm going to share Google Earth, and I'll also show you 6 maps. So these are obviously 2 platforms that are available online, which you can use the mapping features on them to actually remotely estimate the surface area of your dams. And that means you can skip having to go out with your tape measure and measure it. And then also what you can do is you can plot obviously around the high water line and estimate what the surface area is for your calculations. The harvestable rights calculator, I'll talk more when I jump onto it. So bear with me for one moment. This is where it could all go wrong. Let's have another go. So the first platform that I've got just popped up on this screen is Google Earth. And I've really liked the functionality that's come into Google Earth in probably the last 3 years, because it is really easy for you to find where you are, and the mapping tools are incredibly simple. And for the purposes of what we will be using it for today, it's very, very easy. So what I've essentially done is in the search bar, I've typed in Holbrook, and Google Earth is going to zoom me into Holbrook. And what I'm going to do is, so if I was you, I would be looking obviously for wherever my property is. But what I'm just going to do today is I'm just going to zoom in to a random part of Holbrook, and I'm just going to find a dam that looks semi-easy for me. Not that. I don't want to do that one. Just want one that I can see the max the high water line on easily. I can't really. As I said, this is completely random. I would be lying if I said exactly whose paddocks I was looking in at the moment. Let's just go to this one here. So for the purposes of today, this looks like it's been cleaned out recently, actually. For the purposes of today, because I can't quite make out the high water line on this one, this was probably the worst example I could get. But what you can do is you can go to the top toolbar along here. Sorry. And you can use this little tool next to the little location or the place mark one. And this is add path or polygon. And what you can do, so I'm just going to go around the circumference of the dam. You can plot points that can be quite flexible around the shape of the of the dam. I'm just getting a bit rough here, but that's essentially what you've got. And then what Google will do is Google will obviously calculate the perimeter of the points that you've just put around that dam. And it'll also give you the surface area of inside those points. So super easy way if it's a hot day and you're just chilling inside watching the cricket, there's nothing to say you can't pull out your laptop and just have a look at your place and go around on Google Earth and plot out what your current surface area of your tank of your dams are so that you can plug it into the work booklet and you can estimate how deep you currently think it is, or you can go out with your dam deep and measure the actual depths and you can run your calculations there. So Google Earth is super simple. The same thing is with Six Maps. So the Six Maps is a New South Wales government tool, which is free to access. And while you just click in a couple like, yes, I agrees, and that sort of thing, you've got the exact same functionality as you would have in Google. And so what you can do, so again, I have just typed in Holbrook when I've used the search bar. I've just found a dam that I want to know the surface area of so that I can calculate its volume and capacity. I'm going to go to this tool here. The taskbar is a bit stuffed up, but you're going to go to the area tool, which has got the meters squared on it, and you're going to select it. Again, I'm just going to go where the current water level is, and you just click again around the perimeter of either your high water line. If you want to find out the maximum capacity, find your high water line, which might be indicated by some changes in some plants, could be by changes in some plants or some species that are around it. Might be a change of color in the soil as well. But I'm just going with where I see the water's edge to be, and double click to complete. And you can see over in this corner, I'll just drag it next to the dam. You can see that, again, Six Maps has calculated the surface area of that polygon that we've created, that circle of that dam. So we know that that dam surface area is 683 meters squared, and we can substitute that into our equation to roughly figure out what its maximum capacity is or what its current volume is. One thing that I would like to mention about using satellite maps is obviously this one, I'm not entirely sure where its timestamp is. I'd have to find that out. But the thing that I'd like to keep in consideration is that depending on what maps you use, whether it's Google or Six Maps, the timestamp of when that satellite imagery is collected can be really varied. Some of it can be as old as 2019, some of it can be as most recent as last week. It really just depends on that platform and what satellite data they've used and what's available for your area. So I would encourage you to consider that if you're using these to estimate your volume, it's probably not the best use of this tool, because if you're going off the fact that that looks like it's the current water level, but this is dated in 2019, these images are from 2019. What you've got right there is probably very different to what you physically got in the paddock. So it's just important to have a look at the timestamp that is available on those satellite images to see whether or not they're accurate. I would encourage you to utilize tools like this to estimate your maximum capacity for your dams, because you should be able to identify the high water line, which I'm actually anticipating is probably this line here. And that helps you figure out your maximum capacity. So I wouldn't use remote tools like this for calculating your current capacity, but for calculating maximum capacity, I wouldn't use it for measuring current volume. I would use it for measuring maximum capacity. In saying about the timestamp stuff, using satellite imagery where you might be able to adjust the time frame of when the images have come in For example, I know that the Australian feed-based monitor, their satellite images are pretty much updated yearly. So you can go into your My MLA portal, access the Australian feed-based monitor, remove a heap of filters and adjust it back to just satellite images. And you can actually navigate by year and see satellite images from each year. And that can be a really useful tool for you to go back and see what dams have been reliable throughout different periods. Now, the Australian feed-based monitor is the only one that I have personally looked at that you can adjust the time frame, but they are good things to just explore and have a look at and just reflect a little bit, even if you've got old aerial photos or something like that. So if you are new to a farm and say coming in as a manager, it might be really useful to explore old satellite imagery to be able to identify what dams were quite reliable during difficult times. So those are just two simple satellite imagery tools that are free and easy to access. As I said, I would strongly recommend using these as a quick tool to measure your maximum capacity of your dams, finding that high water level, that high water line, and plugging them into your calculations in your farm water audit booklet. Avoid using them unless you're confident in the timestamp being relative for your current volume. I would say go out, measure it, get your dam deep out for your current volume. That I can't emphasize getting accurate current volumes for your dams from a decision-making point. So those are the two tools that I wanted to show you. The other one, the third and final, is the maximum harvestable rights calculator. And it's really good that I've got Pat online. He is from the Natural Resource Access Regulator. And after I demonstrate this tool, Pat's going to jump on and answer a couple questions about some basic landholder rights and stock and domestic rights. But for now, the harvestable rights, so the harvestable rights in our system, they allow our landholders to capture and store a proportion of rainfall runoff. And so there's two different regions. We have the eastern region, which is the region that we fall under. And what we can do as part of our harvestable rights is we can harvest up to 10% of the average annual regional rainfall runoff. And we can capture that in our dams, provided our dams meet a criteria. And we can capture that and we can use it for any purpose. In the Western Division, all rainfall runoff may be captured in dams and used for any purpose. So, but I'll get Pat to go into that in a minute. So when we're using the maximum harvestable rights calculator, it's a really easy, simple tool to use. What you're going to just need is to either know the GPS location of where your property is or feel confident using the map to find it and click it. And of course, you're just going to need to know the area of your property too. So we're going to use our example scenario farm. And so we're going to find our land holding, and I'm going to be very general with this. But let's go. Let's scroll in here. I'm just going to say my farm's about there. I'm going to scroll down. The total land holding area of our example property, I believe, was 209 hectares. Very simple. And then we're going to hit calculate. So we know that Holbrook falls within that eastern part of the map. So we know that we're going to be able to harvest 10% of our annual rainfall. Let me just double check that. Yep, up to 10% of the average annual rainfall runoff, and we can use it for whatever we want in our dams. But the maximum capacity that we are allowed to retain on that land holding for 209 hectares is 14.63 megalitres of water. Now, Pat will have a bit more of a chat about harvestable rights and where you can put dams for your harvestable rights. But what you're imagining is that for that land holding, that's the maximum amount that you can harvest off the landscape without having to acquire any permits as such. So you can have that storage. So what we know from our presentation, and just bear with me while I grab it up. So that's 14.6 megalitres for the example of our farm. Sorry. For our example of our property, we're actually quite significantly under that maximum harvestable rights based on these reliable dams. So what I would say is that if you're feeling up to it, you could definitely go around all of your dams and do a whole stock take of your maximum capacity of all of your dams. And you would be able to pair that up against what the New South Wales Water harvestable rights maximum harvestable rights calculator says. So that essentially brings my demonstration of these couple tools of remote sensing imagery and remote imagery, satellite imagery, and the Water New South Wales maximum harvestable rights calculator. So, Pat, if you're there and would like to pop your camera on and say hello, yes, go for it.
Yeah, thanks, Jess. Yeah, hi everyone. Sorry, it's a bit late to the meeting. Said it's a bit of a meeting heavy day today, but you explained that much better than I do, Jess. Actually, that was really good. So, did you want me to go over? Have you discussed what actually the requirements are for a harvestable rights dam, or I can run through that if you like.
Yeah, look, I think it would be really great if you could run over, obviously, if you're content with my description of harvestable rights, if you want to go into, what constitutes a harvestable rights dam and what's involved in obviously either establishing one or renovating or enlarging a harvestable rights dam. And perhaps if you'd also like to touch on the landholder, domestic and stock rights as well that some people in the eastern region might experience or might have access to.
No worries at all. What I'll do, I'll actually try and share my screen because I did find some slides. Just let me know if you can see that picture, Strala Streamwater.
Yes, I can see that one.
Up? Excellent. So, yeah, afternoon, everyone. I'm Pat Yates. I'm the Education Manager with Natural Resources Access Regulator, filling in for Nathan Blakelock. He's one of our Senior Project Officers, and he's unfortunately on the road today. So with harvestable rights, and we discussed this a lot with landholders at field days, there are a number of requirements that a dam needs to meet in order to be considered a harvestable rights dam. And the most fundamental, probably the key one, is they can only be built on what they call minor watercourses. And for all New South Wales, every watercourse in the state is classified under the Strala Streamwater. So a minor watercourse is a first or a second order watercourse. And this diagram here just really sort of sets it out. So your first order watercourses are very often they're just gullies, but they're the headwaters of a water system. So you get two first orders come together. When two first orders come together, they'll become a second, as you can see just up here. A first flows into a second order, it remains a second order. You have to get two second orders to come together for it to then progress through to a third order. So you need two creeks or two watercourses of the same classification to come together before it progresses up to the next level. So your minor watercourses, as I said, they're first and second order watercourses. So you can build a harvestable rights dam on one of the first orders or a second order, or you can build it on a hillside, an unmapped watercourse. The big thing is you can't build them within 40 metres of a major watercourse. So where those two second orders come together, you couldn't build it right on that juncture. It'd have to be back 40 metres at least from where those two watercourses join and it becomes a third. Basically, like I said, first and second order minor watercourses are predominantly gullies. They'll flow when it rains, but they do have, once you get into the third orders, not that third orders are always permanently flowing, but I suppose they contribute much more to permanent flows into your major watercourses, into your large rivers and creeks. So that's where you can build any harvestable rights dam. When it comes to the requirements or permits you may need, under the Water Management Act, which is what NRA enforces against, or judges compliance, assesses compliance, against, you don't need a water access license. You don't need an approval to actually build the dam under our Act. But one thing we do say to everybody is variations between local council areas, it does change. There's not, unfortunately, it's not a blanket one size fits all across a state. So we do suggest that you go to your local council and just say, do I need any DA consent or do I need any approvals in order to build a dam on my property? They may still be required under that Act. Also, if you're going to clear any native veg or there's crown land easements on your property, you may still need to get approvals from those departments to undertake any works on that piece of land. But as a general rule of thumb, usually in areas that are zoned rural, if it's a minor watercourse, most councils you don't require, but I'd definitely go and check with council as a starting point just to make sure you're not going to you're not going to do anything there that may need an approval. So it's great to look at that diagram, but then you go, well, how do I know what's what on my property? So has it folded over to the next screen now, Jess? There should be a water management regulation, just the hydroline data. Is that showing up there now? Yep.
Yes,
cool.
it has.
So this is the hydroline data which you can access. It's the same mapping that you'll find on 6 Maps as well. If you can vary the actual the screen that you see or the graphic you see on 6 Maps, you can slide it up and it'll just show watercourses. So this is what you'll see, and this is the hydroline data that we use in government to actually assess or map out all the watercourses. And if you'll see it there, fortunately, we have access in government to what's called an industry view, which color codes everything, so it makes it really, really easy for us. But if you'll see, unfortunately, this isn't publicly accessible, although we are pushing to make it at least be able to color code what's on the hydroline. But that section there is the same as what you will see on 6 Maps or the hydroline data. So if you understand the Australia stream order, you can actually figure out what watercourses on your property are first and second order. So you'll see these ones here. That's where the course starts, the watercourse starts. So they're first orders. And you'll see those ones on the other diagram, the coloured diagram, are first order. 2 first come together, become a second. So if this was your property, you could actually look at it and you can see there's a few dams are actually indicated they are built on those second order watercourses there. So if you were going to, if you're assessing your dams to see how big your harvestable rights dams are, you could confirm, yep, they're harvestable rights. The scenario I just saw, if you were well under what your entitlement was and you wanted to build an extra dam to maximise your ability to use that entitlement, then you could map out, or you could look at this mapping and look at your property and go, yep, that's a good spot to build a dam. They're 2 first, that's a second order. Yes, I can build a dam there. So like I said, the fundamental principle is that Australia stream order. If you understand that, then you can actually look at 6 Maps or you can look at the hydroline data and actually figure out where you can build a HR dam on your property. There is something interesting here on this one. You'll see they're 2 second order watercourses. I don't know if you can see my mouse moving, but from that point on, it's actually a third order watercourse, which is that part there. You'll see there's a dam. Looks like there's a dam built on that third order watercourse. A lot of dams, older dams on properties, well, they've been around for a long time. With these dams on third order watercourses, if you have got one on your property, if you can go back and use satellite data or use historical imagery and establish when it was built, because if it was built pre-January 99, then it can be there. You don't need to get an approval. You don't need to get a water access license. It can stay there as long as it's not bigger than 7 megalitres. That's the one thing. There was one section under the old Act which allowed you to build a dam on a third order water course as long as it wasn't bigger than 7 megalitres. They've carried that over into the current day. The caveat is you can only use it for stock and domestic water. The beauty with harvestable rights dams, true harvestable rights dams, are on minor water courses. You can use that water for anything at all. Irrigation, stock, domestic, commercial purposes, whatever you want to use it for, as long as you don't exceed the maximum capacity allowable for your property, that overall volume when you add the volume of all your dams together. So I just point that out, because there are quite a few of those older established dams on properties we do come across. So it's nothing to panic about, but it's just, if you can go back and establish when it was built, if it's pre-2000 essentially, and not bigger than 7 meg, you're right to use it for stock and domestic. If it's built after 2000, that's where you would need to try and get an approval for it. You'd need a works approval to have the dam there, and you'll need water access license as well. That's it for that one. And I suppose the other thing I just chat about is stock and domestic rights. It's another basic landholder right. So that's in addition to your harvestable rights. So your stock and domestic right allows a landholder who has direct access to a water course. So it might be a third order, fourth order, fifth order water course. So it's something that's permanently flowing. If your property, if you've got direct access to it, flows through your property, or it borders your property, you can actually put a pump on that and take water for stock and domestic use only. And you don't need a works approval for the pump, and you don't need a water access license. So domestic use is normal use around a household, and stock use or stock water is essentially that. You can fill stock troughs with it. So that's an additional basic landholder right where you can access water on top of what you can capture in your harvestable rights dams. And I'm just looking at the time, Jess, and I see I've probably blown about all the time. There's about 3 minutes to go. So I will stop there, but if there's any questions, happy to take them.
No, that was brilliant. Thank you for addressing those. I think it was very appropriate for where we'd left off with harvestable rights. So thank you very much for that, Pat. Of course, I understand that we've had a couple people drop off this afternoon, but this will be recorded, obviously. And if anyone watching in the future has any questions about basic landholder rights, harvestable rights, stock and domestic rights, or just generally any questions around stream order or what you can potentially do on your property, including bores and drilling, and any questions about any documentation or permitting, the Natural Resources Access Regulator is a great place to reach out to and ask questions. They are such a friendly team so far, from my experience, and absolute wealths of knowledge. I have included some fact sheets in your farm water audit kit, and also will be sporadically sending out some additional resources and fact sheets that are of use that might provide a bit more information on those different aspects as well. So thank you very much, Pat, for jumping online. Yes, so if you haven't already, please don't forget to register for part 3, which will be where we work on estimating our losses, evaporation and seepage, and considering what our residual water is in our dam systems on our properties. We'll be calculating out, obviously, how many days worth of water that we do have for our current requirements on farm, which is super valuable for helping you have a bit of a reality moment of what our current farm water situation is. And of course, we're also going to have David Thompson online again next fortnight for part 3. And following, obviously, having our reality moment of what our situation is, David's going to talk to us a little bit about options for optimizing our farm dams. And then I think I will try and organize a part 4, which will look at some of that reticulation and flow rate stuff. If you have enjoyed the Farm Water Audit webinar series, but would like to experience a full day workshop, we do have 2 full day workshops coming up in 2025, March 5th and 6th, where we will have Peter Smith from Sapphire Irrigation down again, and we'll be going through this whole process, but with a little bit more detail and more as a whole comprehensive. And we'll be having a bit more of a deeper look into the farm water management plan as well. But other than that, please don't forget to register. Don't forget to look out for those full day workshops coming up in the new year. We will also hopefully have a series of field days, which will be both at our demonstration sites, which we have established for the project, as well as just a couple integrated with some other events that HLN is running. So, thank you very much to everyone. I hope everyone has a lovely afternoon, and I'll catch you all on the 26th. Same date, or different date, same time, same place. Okay, thanks guys.